Hello, everybody. This is B, and we are back with Chapter 3 of Five Nights at Freddy's, The Twisted Ones. Sorry it's taken a while. I've been super busy getting ready for, basically, my freedom for a small bit. But I was having issues with college, so we'll see how well that goes. But anyways, none of that. We're done with that. Chapter 3. Charlie checked her watch. She was on time to meet John, even early. She passed under a streetlight and looked down at herself, checking her clothes. Oh no. The knees of her jeans were wet with mud, and there was a dark stain where she had wiped her fingers clean of the dead man's blood. I can't show up covered in blood. He's seen me like this too many times already. She sighed and turned around. Thankfully, Jessica was gone when she got back to the room. Charlie didn't want to talk about what had just happened. Clay hadn't explicitly told her to keep it a secret, but she was fairly sure she shouldn't broadcast her private visit to a crime scene. Charlie cast a glance at the faces under their pillowcase cover, but didn't go to them. She wanted to show her project to John, but like Jessica, he might not understand. She opened a dresser drawer and stared down at the contents without registering them. In her mind, she saw the body again, its limbs splayed out as if it had been thrown down where it lay. She covered her face with her hands, taking deep breaths. She had seen the scars, but she'd never seen the wounds of the spring lock fresh. Now Dave's eyes came to her, the look of shock just before he fell. Charlie could feel the locks in her hands, feel them resist, then give away and snap. That's what happened. That's what I did. She swallowed and slid her hands down to her throat. Charlie shook her head like a dog shaking off wet coat. She looked at the open drawer again, concentrating. I need to change. What is all this? The drawer was filled with brightly colored shirts, all unfamiliar. Charlie startled, a dim panic seizing her. What is all this? She picked up a t-shirt and dropped it again, then forced herself to take a deep breath. Jessica. They're Jessica's. She opened the wrong drawer. Get it together, Charlie. She told herself sternly, and somehow it sounded like Aunt Jen's voice in her head. Despite everything that lay between her and her aunt, just imagining her cold, authoritative voice made Charlie a little calmer. She nodded to herself and grabbed what she needed, a clean t-shirt and jeans. She dressed hurriedly, then left to meet John. We are still recording, right? Okay, good. Her stomach fluttering, half excited, half sick. A date, she thought. What if it doesn't go well? Worse, what if it does? As she neared the Thai restaurant, she saw that John was already there. He was waiting outside, but he couldn't look impatient. Oh, he didn't look impatient. He didn't spot her right away, and Charlie slowed her pace for a moment, watching him. He seemed at ease, gazing into the middle distance with a vague, pleasant expression. He had an air of confidence he hadn't possessed a year ago. It wasn't that he'd been unsure of himself then, but now he looked adult. Maybe it was because he'd gone straight to work after high school. Maybe it was what happened last year at Freddy's. Charlie thought with an unexpected sense of envy. Although she moved out on her own, a new home and a new college, she felt as if the experience had left her more a child, not less. Not a cared for or protected child, but one who was vulnerable and unmoored. A child who had looked under the bed and seen the monsters. John noticed her and waved. Charlie waved and smiled. Then the expression unforced. Date or not, it was good to see him. How was your last class? He said by way of greeting, and Charlie shrugged. I don't know. It was a class. How was the rest of work? He grinned. It was work. Are you hungry? Yes, Charlie said decisively. They headed inside and were motioned to a table. Have you been here before, Charlie? Not John. Dear God, I messed that up so badly. I had to say not Charlie. John asked, and Charlie shook her head. I don't get out much. I don't even come out to town that often. The college is sort of its own little world, you know? I can imagine, John said cheerfully. Now that the secret was out that he wasn't in school, he apparently shed his earlier discomfort. It isn't a little bit, he searched for the words. Doesn't it feel a little isolated? Not really, Charlie said. If it's a prison, it's not one of the worst. I didn't mean to compare it to a prison, John said. So, come on, what are you studying? Charlie hesitated. There was no reason not to tell John, but it seemed too soon, too risky to announce that she was eagerly following in her father's footsteps. She didn't want to tell him she was studying robotics until she had some idea of how he would respond, just like with her project. Most colleges make you do a set of classes your first year English, maths, everything like that, she said, hoping it would sound like a response. Suddenly, Charlie didn't want to talk about school. She wasn't sure she could keep up a conversation about anything, really. She looked at John and for a moment imagined the spring lock wounds in his neck. Her eyes widened and she bit the inside of her cheek, trying to ground herself. Tell me about your job, she said, and saw her own hesitation mirrored on his face. I mean, I like the work, he said. More than I thought I would, actually. There's something about doing physical labor that kind of frees my mind. It's like meditation. It's hard, though, really hard. Construction workers always make it look so easy, but it turns out it takes a while to build up that kind of muscle. He stretched his arms comically over his head, and Charlie laughed, but can't help noticing that he was clearly well on his way to that kind of muscle. John leaned to his left and gave his armpit a quick sniff, then he made a look of mock embarrassment. Charlie looked down at her menu and giggled. Do you already know what you want? She said. Then the waitress appeared out of nowhere, as if she had been listening nearby. John ordered, and Charlie froze. She said it just to say something, but she didn't know what to get. Suddenly she noticed all the prices. Everything on the menu was impossibly expensive. She hadn't even thought about money when she accepted John's invitation, but now her mind jumped to her wallet and her nearly empty bank account. Misreading her expression, John leaped in. If you never had Thai food, pad Thai is good, he suggested. I should have asked, he said awkwardly. If I'm buying a lady a dinner, I should make sure she likes the food. He looked embarrassed, but Charlie was flooded with relief. Buying a lady dinner. No, I'm sure I'll like it, she said. Pad Thai, thanks. She told the waitress, then gave John a mock glare. Who are you calling a lady? She said playfully, and he laughed. What's wrong with that? It just sounds weird you calling me a lady, Charlie said. So anyway, what do you all day... Okay, yeah, that's weird. So anyway, what do you all day besides meditate? Well, the days are long, and like I said, I'm still writing, so there's that. It's strange being in a hurricane again, though. I didn't mean to put down roots. Put down roots? Like join a bowling team or something. Ties to the community. Things like that. Charlie nodded. She of all people understood the need to remain part. Why did you take the job here then? She asked. I know they needed people because of the storm, but you didn't have to come, right? People are still building things in other places. That's true, he admitted. To be honest, it was more about getting away from where I was. Sounds familiar, Charlie muttered, too softly for him to hear. The waitress returned with her food. Charlie took a quick bite of rice noodles and immediately burned her mouth. She grabbed her water glass and drank. Yikes. That's hot, she said. So, what were you getting away from? She asked, questioningly casually, as if the answer would be simple. Do you have nightmares too? She held back the words, waiting for him to speak. John hesitated. Girl, actually, he said. He paused, searching for a reaction. Charlie stopped chewing. That wasn't at all the answer she'd been expecting. She swallowed, nodding with self-conscious enthusiasm. After the excruciating silence, John went on. We started dating the summer after Freddy's. I told her I wasn't looking for anything seriously. She said she wasn't either. Then suddenly it was 6 months later, and we were serious. I had just started working. I moved out on my own and had this grown-up relationship. It was a shock, but a good one, I guess. He stopped, not sure whether he should continue. Charlie wasn't sure she wanted to give him permission. So tell me about her, she said calmly, avoiding eye contact. I'm not dating her, but it's not like she's dead. Her name is Rebecca. She's pretty, I guess. Smart, a year older than me. A college student studying English, has a dog. So yeah, she was alright. What happened? I don't know, he said. Really? Charlie said dryly, and he smiled. No, I felt on guard around her. Like there were things I can't tell her, things she just never understood. It wasn't because of her. She was great. But she knew I was holding something back. She just didn't know what it was. I wonder what it could have been, Charlie asked quietly. The question was rhetorical. They both knew the answer. John smiled. Well, anyway, she broke up with me and I was devastated. Blah, blah, blah. Actually, I don't think I was that devastated. John looked down, focusing on his food, but not touching it. Have you ever tried to tell anyone about Freddy's? John glanced back up and pointed his fork at Charlie. She shook her head. It wasn't just what happened, he went on. I can't imagine telling the story and having her believe me, but it wasn't only that. I wanted her to know the facts of it. But more, I wanted to tell her what it did to me. How it changed me. It changed all of us, Charlie said. Yeah, and not just last year. From the beginning. I didn't realize it until after we had all gone back, how much that place had just followed me. He glanced at Charlie. Sorry, it must have been weirder for you. Charlie shrugged uncomfortably. Maybe I think it's just different. Her hand was resting on the table beside her water glass, and now John reached out to touch it. She stiffened and he drew back. Sorry, he said. I'm sorry. It's not you, Charlie said quickly. His dead face, the dead skin of his throat. She had barely noticed it at the time, overwhelmed by the whole experience, but now the feeling of the dead man's neck came back to her. It was as if she were touching him right now. She could feel his skin, slack and cold, and slick with blood. She could feel the blood on her fingers. She rubbed her hands together. They were clean. She knew they were clean, but still she could still feel the blood. They were being dramatic. I'll be right back, she said, and got up before John could respond. She made her way around the tables to the bathrooms at the back of the restaurant. It was a 3-stall bathroom. Thankfully, it was empty. Charlie went straight to the sink and turned the hot water on full blast. She pumped soap onto her hands and scrubbed them for a long time. She closed her eyes and focused on the feeling of hot water and soap, and slowly the memory of the blood faded. As she dried her hands and looked at herself in the mirror, her reflection looked wrong, somehow. Somehow off. As if it wasn't herself she saw, but a copy. Someone else dressed as her. Get it together, Charlie. She thought, trying to hear the words in her Aunt Jen's voice as she had before. She closed her eyes. Get it together. When she opened them again, she was back in the mirror. Her reflection was her own. Charlie smoothed her hair and went back out to the table where John was waiting for her with a concerned expression. Is everything okay? He asked nervously. Did I do something wrong? Oh, did I do something? Charlie shook her head. No, of course not. It's been a long day, that's all. There's an understatement. She glanced at her watch. Do we still have time for a movie? She asked. It's almost 8:30. Yeah, we should go, John said. Are you done? Yeah, it was really good, thank you, she smiled at him. The lady liked it. John smiled back, visibly relaxing. He went to the counter to pay, and Charlie went outside waiting for him on the sidewalk. Dark had fallen, and there was a chill in the air. Charlie wished briefly that she thought to bring a sweatshirt. John joined her after a moment. Ready? Yeah, Charlie said. Where is it? He looked at her for a moment and shook his head. The movie was your idea, remember? He laughed. Like I said, I don't get out much. Charlie looked down at her feet. The theater's only a few blocks away. They walked in silence for a moment. I found out what happened to Freddy, she said without thinking, and John looked at her, surprised. Really? What happened? They were tearing it down, then the storm came, and everyone got called away. Now it's just standing there, half collapsed. All the stuff is gone, though, she added, seeing the question in John's eyes. I don't know what they did with them. It was a lie. Charlie couldn't tell what had really happened without telling them how she knew. All those questions led back to the same place, the dead man in the field. Who were you? What about your father's house? John asked. Did you ask your Aunt Jen about it? What's she going to do with it? I don't know, Charlie said. I haven't talked to her since August. She fell silent, not looking at John as they walked. They reached their destination, a shabby one-screen movie theater named the Grand Palace. Its name was either ironic or wishful thinking. Embezzled on the marquee was their current showing, Zombies versus Zombies. I think it's about zombies, John joked as they went inside. The movie had already started. Someone on screen was screaming. as what was apparently zombies came out after her from all sides. She was surrounded. The creatures crouched like wild dogs, ready to spring and devour her. They moved to attack, and a man grabbed her arm, pulling her to safety. Charlie! John touched her arm, whispering. Oopsie, that was a whole lot louder than I meant. Over there, he gestured to the back row. The place was half full, but the back row was empty. They made their way beautifully to the middle. They sat, and Charlie turned her attention to the screen. Thank goodness, she thought. Maybe we can finally relax. She settled back in her seat, letting the images on the screen blur past her. Shrieks, gunfire, and thrumming music filled the silence between them. From the corner of her eye, she saw John glance at her nervously. Charlie focused her attention on the movie. The main characters, a man and a woman with generic, angular good looks on the big screen, was shooting automatic weapons into a crowd of zombies. As the first ranks were stopped, though severed in half by the guns, they still twitched on the ground, and the ones behind climbed on their fallen cohorts. The camera switched back to the man and woman, who jumped a fence and took off running. Behind them, the zombies kept coming, struggling forward, obviously, to the undead bodies they waded through. The music was urgent, the bass line pounding like an artificial heartbeat, and Charlie relaxed against the seat, letting herself be absorbed into it all. What was he doing there? The image of the dead man returned to her. Something about the wounds bothered her, but she hadn't been able to put her finger on it. I recognized those wounds. They all matched what I remembered, but something was different. What was it? She sensed movement next to her and saw John trying to stretch an arm towards her. Really? She thought. Do you have enough room? She asked, and he scooted away without waiting for a response. She scooted away without waiting for a response. He looked embarrassed, but she glanced away, planting her elbow on the other armrest, staring fixedly at the screen. Enough room, that's it. She closed her eyes, concentrating on the image in her head. The wounds were slightly larger and more spaced out. The suit he was wearing was bigger than the suits from Freddy's. The man was probably 5'10" or 5'11", which means suits must have been at least 7 feet tall. On screen it was quiet again, but it was short-lived. Charlie watched, mesmerized at the dirt spill. Sorry guys, I had to take care of something, but we will continue I accidentally kind of dropped my book. So, on screen there was quiet again, but it was short-lived. Charlie watched him mesmerized as the dirt spilled away of its own volition, moving like magic as the zombies rose. It wouldn't be like that, Charlie thought definitely. It's not that easy to get out of the grave. By now the zombies on screen was halfway out, crawling to the surface and looking around with its glassy, mindless eyes. You can't get out that fast, Charlie blinked and shook her head, trying to stay focused. Zombies, lifeless things. The closet was full of costumes, lifeless yet ever watching, with plastic eyes and dead, hanging links. Somehow their corpse-like stares had never bothered her, or Sammy. They liked to touch the fur, sometimes put it in their mouths, and giggle at the funny way it felt. Some was old and matted, some new and soft. The closet was their place, just for the two of them. Sometimes they babbled together in words that had meaning owing to them. Sometimes they played side by side, lost in separate worlds of make-believe. But they were always together. Sammy was playing with a truck when the shadow came. He ran it back and forth on the floor, not noticing that the ribbon of light had been cut off. Charlie turned and saw the shadow, so still he could be an illusion. Just another costume out of place. Then the sudden movement, the chaos of fabric and eyes. The truck clanked as it fell on the floor, and then loneliness. A dark so complete that she began to believe she'd never seen at all. The memories of the sight had only been a dream, a trick of the utter blackness. She tried to call his name. She could feel him nearby. But all around her were solid walls. Can you hear me? Sammy! Let me out! Sammy! But he was gone, and he was never there again. Charlie, are you okay? What? Charlie looked at John. She realized she'd pulled her feet up in the chair and was hugging her knees to her chest. She sat back, setting her shoes back on the floor. John gave her a concerned look. I'm fine, she whispered, and gestured to the screen. John put a hand on her forearm. Are you sure you're okay? He asked. Charlie stared straight ahead. Now that there were people running, the zombies lurched after them. This doesn't make sense, Charlie muttered, mostly to herself. What? John leaned towards her. Charlie didn't move, but she repeated herself. It doesn't make sense. Zombies don't make sense. If they're dead, the central nervous system is shot. They can't do any of this. If there's a functioning central nervous system which has somehow decayed to the point that movement and thought are possible but severely hindered, fine. If it makes them violent, fine. But why would they want to eat brains? It doesn't make sense. That man wouldn't have been able to walk on his own in a suit so oversized. He didn't walk into that field. The suit did. The animatronic was carrying him inside. It walked into that field of its own accord. Maybe it's symbolic, John suggested, eager to engage, however odd the conversation was. You know, like the idea that you eat your enemy's heart to gain their power. Maybe the zombies eat its enemy's brain to gain its central nervous system. He glanced at Charlie, but she was only half listening. Okay, she said. She had been irritated by the movie. Now she was irritated by the conversation she herself had introduced. I'll be right back, she told John, and got up without waiting for him to respond. She made her way out of the row, through the lobby, and out the door. On the sidewalk, she took a deep breath and felt an intense relief at the wash of fresh air. Dreams about being trapped are common, she reminded herself. Charlie, you're a bitch. She looked it up when they began. They were only slightly less common than dreams of showing up to class naked, plummeting from a great height, or having your teeth all of a sudden fall out. But this didn't feel like a dream. Charlie jostled her thoughts back to the present, where even the crime scene of the gruesome murder seemed like a safer place to keep them. There must be tracks. He didn't walk there himself. There must be some clue what carried him into the field and where it came from. Charlie shivered. She went back inside the building. John's going to think I'm nuts. She arrived at the swinging theater doors and stopped. She couldn't do it. She had to know. There was a young man at the concession stand, and she asked him if the place had a payphone. He pointed silently to his right, and Charlie went, fishing in her pocket for a quarter, and for Chief Burke's card. She dialed carefully, pausing between the numbers to check the card again, as if writing might have changed since she looked. Clay Burke answered on the third ring. Burke? Clay? It's Charlie. Charlie, what's wrong? He was instantly alert. Charlie could picture him leaping to his feet, ready to run. Nothing. I'm fine, she assured him. Everything is okay. I just wanted to see if you found anything else. Not so far, he told her. Oh. Burke let the silence stretch between them, and Charlie finally broke it. Is there anything else you can tell me? I know it's confidential, but you brought me in this far. Please, if there's anything else you know, anything else you found, anything you know about the man, the victim. No, Clay said slowly. I mean, I'll let you know when we find something. Okay, Charlie said. Thanks. I'll be in touch. Okay. Charlie hung up the phone before he could say goodbye. I don't believe you, she said to the phone on the wall. Back in the theater, her eyes took a moment to adjust as she inched along the back row towards her seat, careful not to make a noise. John looked up at her with a smile as she sat down, but didn't say anything. Charlie smiled with a grim determination, settled back in her seat, and scooted over until her shoulder was pressed against his. From behind her head, she heard him make a surprised noise. Then he shifted, putting his arm around her shoulders. He gripped her tightly for a moment, halfway to a hug, and Charlie leaned in a little, unsure how else to reciprocate. What if someone put him in the costume like some of the wind-up death traps? Stuck him inside that thing, then set him walking until the spring locks went off. But who would know how to do that? Why would someone do that? Did I miss anything? Charlie asked, though she hadn't paid any attention to the first half of the movie anyways. It was daytime on the screen, and it looked like they were more people holed up in some sort of bunker. Charlie couldn't remember which of them had been the original characters. She wriggled in her seat, and John's arm around her had relaxed. But now the arm on the seat was digging into her side. He started to move away, but she settled herself again. No, it's okay, she whispered. His arm circled her again. Just get on with it, Charlie said, flustered. John startled. Sorry, I didn't want to be too aggressive. No, not you, Charlie gestured towards the screen. They should have just built a minefield around the bunker and wait for them all to blow up. The end. I think it's actually what they do in the sequel, but we'll have to wait to watch it for ourselves, he winked. There's another one, she sighed. When the credits started to roll, they gathered their things and headed to the exit with the rest of the small crowd, not speaking until they got outside. On the sidewalk, they stopped. This has been nice, John said, sounding somehow like he meant it, and Charlie laughed and groaned, covering her face with both hands. This has been awful. This has been the worst date ever. I'm so sorry. Thanks for lying, though. John gave an uncertain smile. It was nice to see you, he said, with cautious levity. It's just, can we go somewhere to talk? John nodded, and Charlie started back towards campus with him following behind. The quad was usually empty late at night, or at least mostly empty. There was always someone walking across, some student finishing up late-night work in the lab, some couple ensconced in the dark corner. Tonight was no different, and it was easy enough to find their own dark corner to talk. Charlie sat down under a tree, and John copied her, then waited for her to talk as she stared at the gap between two buildings, where you could almost see the woods. Finally, he prompted her. So, what's up? Right, she met his eyes. Clay came to see me today. John's eyes widened, but he didn't say anything. He took me to see a body, Charlie went on. He had died inside one of the mascot costumes. John was frowning. She could almost see his thoughts working through what this meant and why it involved Charlie. That's not all. Clay told me they found blood in the main dining room at Freddy's. Fake blood. John's head jerked up. You think Dave's alive? Charlie shrugged. Clay didn't come out and say it, but all those scars, he had survived the spring locks of a mascot costume before. He must have known how to escape the building. It didn't look to me like he escaped, John said doubtfully. He could have faked it. It would certainly explain the blood. So what then? Dave is alive and stuffing people into spring-locked suits and killing them? If I could just go back to the restaurant one more time to make sure that Charlie stopped, suddenly aware of the growing anger in John's face. To make sure that what? He asked sternly. Nothing. Clay has it under control. Everything is best left with the police. She clenched her jaw, gazing out over the horizon. Jessica will go with me. Right, John said with a surprised look. Right, you're right. Charlie nodded with forced enthusiasm. Clay has men for this sort of thing, she continued with a furrowed brow. I'm sure they're on top of it. John took Charlie's shoulders lightly. I'm sure what you think it is anyway. Wait. I'm sure it's not what you think it is anyways, he said, hearty, reassuring tone. There's a lot of crime in this world that doesn't involve self-imposing furry robot suits, he laughed, and Charlie forced a smile. Come on, John extended a hand, and Charlie took it. I'll walk you to your dorm. I appreciate the gesture, she said, but Jessica's there, and we have to go through the whole reunion, you know? John laughed. Okay. I'll save you from Jessica and her relentless camaraderie. Charlie grinned. My hero. Where are you staying anyways? That little motel you stayed at last year, actually, John said. I'll see you tomorrow, maybe. Charlie nodded and watched him go, then started on her own way home. Excruciating though the date had been, that last half hour felt like homecoming. It was her and John again. They were familiar again. All we need was a good old-fashioned murder, she said aloud, and a woman walking her dog gave Charlie an odd look as she passed in the opposite direction. I was at a movie. Zombies versus zombies, she called half-heartedly after her retreating back. You should go check it out. They don't put mines around the bunker. Spoiler alert. Charlie had half hoped Jessica would be asleep, but the lights were on when she reached the rooms. She flung open the door before Charlie had her key out of her pocket, her face flushed. So? Jessica demanded. So what? Charlie said, grinning in spite of herself. Hey, before you start into this, I need to ask you something. So you know what? Jessica cried, ignoring her question. Tell me about John. How did it go? She felt the corner of her mouth twitch. Oh, you know, she said casually. Listen, I need you to go somewhere with me in the morning. Charlie, you have to tell me, she moaned exaggeratedly and flopped back on her bed. Then she sprang back up in the sitting position. Come here and tell me. Charlie sat, drawing her legs up under her. It was weird, she admitted. I didn't know what to say. Dates just seemed so uncomfortable. But about what I was saying. But it's John. Shouldn't that outweigh the day part? Well, it didn't, Charlie said. She looked at the floor. She could tell her face was red, and suddenly she wished she hadn't told Jessica anything at all. Jessica put her hands on Charlie's shoulders and looked at her seriously. You're amazing. If John isn't just falling all over himself for you, that's his problem. Charlie giggled. I think he kind of is. It's part of the problem. But there's something else if you would just listen for a second. Oh, there's more, Jessica laughed. Charlie, you need to say something for the second date, you know. What? No, 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 no. I need you to go somewhere with me in the morning. Charlie, I have a lot going on right now. I have exams coming up. I need you. Charlie clenched her jaw for a moment. I need you to help me pick out new clothes for my next date, she said carefully, then waited to see if Jessica would believe a word of it. Charlie, are you kidding me? We'll go first thing in the morning. She jumped up and gave Charlie a giant hug. We'll have a girls' day out. It'll be amazing, Jessica flopped back on her bed. Sleep for now, though. It won't bother you if I work on my project for a while, will it? Not at all, Jessica waved limply, then went still. Charlie turned on her work lamp, a single bright beam that was focused enough to not illuminate the whole room. She uncovered the faces. They were at rest, their features smooth as if in a sleep, but she didn't turn them on yet. The switches that made them move and talk were the only one part of the whole. There was another component. The part that made them listen was always on. Everything that she and Jessica said, every word spoken in the room, outside the window, or even in the hall, they heard. Each new word went into their database, not only a single word, but it was all configurations as they emerged. Each new piece of information was stuck to the piece of information most like it. Everything new was built on something old. They were always learning. Charlie turned on the component that allowed them to speak. Their features rippled softly as if they were stretching themselves. I noticed, said the first one more quickly than usual. So what? Said the second. No what? You know so what? No what? Now what? What now? No how? Why now? Charlie switched them off, staring as the fan slowed to a stop. That didn't make sense. She looked at her watch. About 3 hours too late for bed. She changed quickly and climbed under the sheets, leaving the faces uncovered. There was something unnerving about their exchange. It was faster than it had ever been. It was nonsensical, but there was something about it that rang familiar. It struck her. Were you playing a game? She asked. They couldn't answer and just stared blankly into each other's eyes. And that's the end of chapter 3. So I hope you guys enjoyed. It's definitely interesting. I'm curious about our little bots that's going on. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.